The ship that landed on Earth looked like it had been through hell. Its hull was burned and torn. Pieces of metal hung loose from its sides. Smoke rose from cracks in its engines. The craft touched down on the landing pad outside the United Earth Defense Council headquarters in New Geneva, and for a long moment nothing happened. Security teams surrounded the vessel with their weapons ready. They had never seen a ship like this before. The hatch opened with a painful grinding sound. A creature emerged and the soldiers tensed. It stood on 6 thin legs, with a body covered in hard plates that shimmered like oil on water. Its head was dominated by 2 massive compound eyes that reflected the morning sun in 1,000 tiny fragments. 2 antennae twitched nervously above its skull. It was in being, clearly not from Earth, clearly not from anywhere humans had ever traveled. The creature held up its 4 arms in what appeared to be a gesture of surrender. A small device hung around its neck, and when the being spoke, the device translated its clicks and chirps into rough English. "I am Ambassador Eth of the people. I come in peace. I come to beg." Commander Daniel Grant pushed through the security line. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and deep lines around his eyes. He had commanded Earth's defense forces for 15 years, and he had seen many strange things. But he had never seen an alien kneel before him, which is exactly what the ambassador did next. "Please," Eth said, "you are our last hope." Daniel ordered his men to stand down. He approached the alien and offered his hand, though he was not sure the gesture would mean anything. The ambassador stared at the hand for a moment, then gently touched it with one of his own limbs. His touch was light, almost fragile. "Come inside," Daniel said. "Tell me everything." They walked through the halls of the Defense Council building. Officers stopped and stared. Word spread quickly through the base that something extraordinary was happening. By the time they reached the main briefing room, Captain Lisa Monroe and Chief Tactical Officer Park were already waiting. Lisa was a sharp-eyed woman who led the Rapid Response Division, was younger, brilliant with strategy, but had never faced a real war. Eth stood at the center of the room. His compound eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail. When he spoke, his voice through the translator carried a weight of sorrow that needed no translation. "My people are dying," he began. "The Dominion came to our world 6 months ago. They gave no warning. They made no demands. They simply began killing. They burned our cities. They slaughtered our children in their nurseries. They hunted our elders through the forests where we once found peace." He paused, his antennae drooped. "We are not warriors that have never fought a war. We are builders, thinkers, creators. We tend gardens that span continents. We compose music that takes a lifetime to perform. We believed the galaxy was a place of wonder and cooperation. We were wrong." Lisa leaned forward. "Why come to us? Surely there are other species, other alliances that could help." Eth made a sound that the translator rendered as bitter laughter. "We went to them first. The Galactic Council has 47 member species. We pleaded with each one. They all refused. They are too strong, they said. The risk is too great. Our extinction is unfortunate but acceptable." Frowned, "Acceptable." Those were their exact words. "We are a small people. We have no resources they need. We have no weapons they fear. Our deaths mean nothing to the balance of galactic power. So they will let us die, and they will sleep peacefully knowing they avoided a difficult war." Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the sky. Earth hung in that sky, blue and green and beautiful. His ancestors had fought countless wars on that world. They had survived ice ages and plagues and the slow destruction of their own environment. They had clawed their way to the stars through sheer stubborn refusal to die. "How did you find us?" he asked without turning around. "Your species is famous," Eth said. "Or perhaps infamous is the better word. Earth is classified as a Category 7, the most dangerous rating. Your planet should not support intelligent life. The gravity is crushing. The atmosphere is corrosive. Your star bombards you with radiation. Your world is covered in predators, poisons, and natural disasters that would destroy any other species." He paused again. "And yet you survived. You thrived. You built civilizations and traveled to the stars. The council species do not understand you. They fear you. They call you primitive and savage because they cannot explain how you exist at all." Lisa smiled, though there was no humor in it. "So, we are your last resort because everyone else is too afraid of and we are too crazy to know better." "Yes," Eth admitted. "That is exactly why I am here. I have nowhere else to go. My people have nowhere else to go. There are 40 million left alive. 300 million have already been murdered. In 72 hours, they will reach our final colonies. When they do, my species will cease to exist." Silence filled the room. Daniel continued to stare out the window. Lisa and exchanged glances. The weight of what this alien was asking pressed down on all of them. "We have no treaty with your people," said carefully. "We have no obligation to intervene. If we attack we could start a war that kills millions of humans." "I know," Eth said. "I am asking you to risk everything for strangers. I am asking you to die for people you have never met. I have no right to ask this, but I am asking anyway because you are all we have left." Daniel finally turned from the window. His face was hard but not unkind. He looked at the broken ambassador, at the desperate hope in those compound eyes. "I have read the intelligence reports on he said. "I know what they do to the species they conquer. I know about the death camps and the mass graves. I know about the experiments they perform on prisoners." He walked toward Eth and stopped directly in front of him. "Earth has a long history of ignoring atrocities because they happened far away. We told ourselves it was not our problem. We let millions die because saving them was inconvenient." He shook his head slowly. "I will not add your people to that list of shame." He looked at Lisa and no words passed between them, but understanding did. They had all seen enough evil in their careers. They had all wondered if they would ever have a chance to stand against something truly monstrous. "Contact Admiral," Daniel said. "Tell her to prepare the fleet. We leave in 6 hours." Eth collapsed to the ground. His body shook with what might have been sobs. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Daniel helped him stand. "Do not thank me yet. We may fail. We may all die trying. But I promise you this, Ambassador. They will learn what it means to fight, and they will never forget the lesson." Admiral stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched her fleet come together. Ships emerged from orbital docks across the Earth Defense Network. Destroyers and frigates formed up in precise formations. Troop carriers loaded with Marines rose from surface bases. Fighter wings launched from stations hidden in the asteroid belt. It was the largest military mobilization in human history, and it was happening in hours instead of weeks. Was 54 years old. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 3 decades. She had fought pirates and put down rebellions and protected human colonies from natural disasters. But she had never led a fleet into true alien combat. No human had. They were about to become the first. Her communications officer patched through a message from Commander Grant. She listened to his brief summary of the situation. 40 million lives hanging in the balance. 72 hours until extinction. An enemy that outnumbered them 4-1. "Understood, Commander," she said when he finished. "We will be ready." She turned to her bridge crew. These men and women had trained for years in simulations and exercises. They had never truly been tested. Today that would change. "I want volunteers only," she announced. "What we are about to do may get us all killed. Anyone who wishes to stay behind will do so without shame, but those who come with me will have a chance to save an entire species from annihilation. Make your choice now." Not a single person left their station. Felt pride swell in her chest, but she kept her face calm. "Then let us get to work." Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. On the troop carrier, Sergeant Cole gathered his platoon of orbital drop Marines. They were young, most of them under 30. They had been trained to survive conditions that would kill ordinary soldiers. High-gravity operations, toxic atmosphere combat, extreme temperature warfare. Earth had forged them into something beyond normal human limits. Looked at their faces. He saw fear there, but he also saw determination. These were children of a death planet. They knew what it meant to fight against impossible odds. "Listen up," he said. "The enemy is called they are big, mean, and they think they are the scariest thing in the galaxy. They have never fought humans. They do not know what we are capable of. By the time this is over, they will." A young woman in the back raised her hand. Private first-class tours. She was 23, fresh from advanced training, and had never seen real combat. "Sergeant, what if we fail?" Smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then we die knowing we tried, but the will remember us. They will tell stories about the crazy apes from the death planet who came screaming out of the void to ruin their day. That is not a bad way to be remembered." The Marines laughed. It was nervous laughter, but it helped break the tension. On the bridge of the Defiance, tactical coordinator Chris Bradley ran simulation after simulation. The numbers were grim. Ships were faster and better armed. Their shields could absorb tremendous punishment. Their crews were experienced in conquest and slaughter. But Chris noticed something interesting in the data. They had never lost a major engagement. They had never faced an enemy willing to take catastrophic losses to achieve victory. They fought like predators, attacking when they had the advantage, retreating when they did not. They had never fought prey that bit back. He brought his analysis to Admiral. She studied the data and nodded slowly. "They expect us to fight like civilized beings," she said. "They expect us to retreat when the odds turn against us. They expect us to value our own survival above victory." "Yes, Admiral, and they are wrong." Allowed herself a small smile. "Prepare the fleet for asymmetric engagement. We will not fight their kind of war. We will fight ours." The hours passed quickly. Engineers worked without sleep to prepare the ships. Medics stockpiled supplies and ran drills. Pilots memorized attack patterns and escape routes. Chaplains of every faith moved through the fleet, offering comfort to those who sought it. In the cargo bay of the Taurus sat alone and checked her powered armor for the 20th time. Each seal, each joint, each weapon mount. The suit would keep her alive in environments that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. It would enhance her strength and speed. It would make her something more than human. A shadow fell over her. She looked up to see Lieutenant, her squad leader, was 10 years older, with scars on her face from a training accident that had nearly killed her. She had recovered and returned to duty within 6 months. The doctors said it was impossible, had done it anyway. "First combat?" asked. "Yes, Lieutenant." Sat down beside her. "I want you to remember something. Out there, when everything goes wrong and you think you are going to die, you need to remember why you are doing this. Not for glory or medals, for those people we are going to save. Every shot you fire, every step you take is for them." Nodded. "I understand." "No, you do not, not yet, but you will." Stood and walked away, leaving with her thoughts. Admiral addressed the fleet via holographic broadcast. Her face appeared on screens throughout every ship, every station, every barracks. "In a few hours, we will jump to the system. We will face an enemy that has never known defeat. We will be outnumbered and many of us will not return." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But we are not going there to win a war. We are going there to save lives. 40 million innocent beings are counting on us. They asked the entire galaxy for help and only we answered. Only Earth. Only humanity." Her voice grew stronger. "They think we are primitives from a savage world. They believe we are no threat to their empire of death. They are wrong. We come from a planet that has been trying to kill us for 200,000 years. We survived ice ages and plagues and predators that would give nightmares to any other species. We did not just survive. We conquered. We built cities and ships and weapons. We reached the stars." She leaned forward. Today we show the galaxy what are made of. Today we teach that there are worse things in the universe than them. Today we answer a call for help, not because we must, but because it is right. Because we remember what it feels like to be alone and afraid and desperate for someone to stand with us. The fleet began its final preparations for jump. Engines powered up. Navigation systems locked onto distant coordinates. Crews strapped into their stations and said silent prayers to whatever gods they believed in. "Fleet is ready, Admiral," the navigation officer reported. Straightened in her command chair. "Then let us go save some lives. Initiate jump." The stars stretched into lines of light, and 12 human warships vanished from Earth orbit. They had 68 hours to cross the void. 68 hours before they met the enemy. 68 hours before everything changed forever. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, and every sensor on every ship screamed with warnings. The armada was even larger than they had feared. 47 warships hung in orbit around the final colony world, their weapons flashing as they bombarded the surface below. Columns of fire rose from the planet, visible even from space. Cities were burning. Millions were dying. Admiral studied the tactical display and felt ice form in her stomach. The enemy fleet was arranged in a standard domination pattern, with heavy cruisers at the center and lighter vessels forming a protective screen. It was a formation designed to intimidate and overwhelm. It had probably never failed. "All ships battle stations," she ordered. "Launch fighter wings, prepare for full engagement." On the bridge of the enemy flagship, Overlord received the report of the new arrivals with mild curiosity. He was a massive reptilian creature, standing 8 feet tall with scales the color of dried blood. His eyes were yellow and cold, the eyes of a predator who had never known fear. He had personally overseen the extinction of 3 species, though would be his 4th. "Unknown vessels have entered the system," his sensor officer reported. 12 ships of primitive design. Registry indicates they are from the Sol system. Searched his memory. Sol, the death planet. He had heard stories about the creatures who lived there. Violent apes who had somehow crawled out of their toxic world. The Galactic Council had classified them as dangerous but irrelevant. They were too few, too primitive, too far from the centers of power. "Hail them," commanded. "Let us see what these apes want." Received the communication request and accepted it. The face appeared on her screen, and she felt a primal surge of disgust. This was the being responsible for 300 million deaths. This was the monster who ordered children thrown into mass graves. "You have entered space," said. His translator gave his voice a hissing quality. "Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Kept her face neutral. "I am Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force. We are here to stop the genocide of the people. You will cease all hostilities immediately and withdraw from this system." Stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was an ugly sound like bones breaking. "You amuse me, ape. You bring 12 ships against 47. You threaten the Dominion with your primitive weapons. Do you understand what you are doing? You are declaring war on an empire that has crushed 100 worlds." "I understand perfectly," replied. "The question is whether you understand what you are facing. We are Overlord. We do not frighten easily, and we do not back down." The laughter died in his throat. He studied this human female with new interest. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation, only cold determination. "Then you will die with the insects," he said. "All ships destroy the intruders." The fleet began to move. Cruisers broke from their orbital positions and accelerated toward the human formation. Weapons charged with killing light. Fighters launched in swarms. "Here they come," Chris Bradley reported from his tactical station. "Enemy fleet is advancing in standard attack formation." Watched the approaching storm of death and made her decision. "All ships, execute pattern Omega 7. Defiance will take point. Let them come to us." The human fleet did something unexpected. Instead of retreating or spreading out, they tightened their formation. They flew directly toward the enemy, weapons blazing. Lieutenant Commander Jake led the fighter wings into the maelstrom. His pilots were young and scared, but they flew with precision that came from years of training in Earth's brutal atmosphere. They had learned to fly in hurricanes and thunderstorms. They had practiced combat maneuvers in conditions that would kill pilots from any other world. The first fighters fell in seconds. Human weapons were crude but devastating. Kinetic rounds tore through enemy hulls. Explosive missiles turned sleek alien craft into expanding clouds of debris. The pilots had never faced anything like this. On the destroyer UES Relentless, Captain Palmer felt his ship shudder as 3 enemy beams struck the hull. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in. A hull breach on Deck 7. Fires in the engine room. 12 crew members dead. Seal the breaches, ordered. Reroute power to weapons, return fire. His crew moved with desperate efficiency. They were hurt, but they were not done. The Relentless unleashed a full broadside at the nearest cruiser. The alien ship's shields flickered and failed. A second later, human missiles punched through its hull and detonated inside. Watched 2 of his frigates die in the opening minutes of battle. He felt something he had not felt in decades: uncertainty. These primitives fight without regard for their own survival, his tactical officer observed. They absorb damage that would force any sensible enemy to retreat. They are insane, growled. Increase firepower, overwhelm them. The battle grew more intense. Human ships took terrible punishment but refused to fall back. When one vessel was too damaged to continue, it simply moved to the rear while others covered its retreat. There was no panic, no disorder, just cold, relentless aggression. Admiral directed the fight from the heart of the chaos. She had lost track of how many times the Defiance had been hit. The bridge was filled with smoke and the cries of wounded crew, but her people kept fighting. They kept dying, and they kept killing. Admiral, they are transmitting, her communications officer shouted. They are watching the battle. They say they have never seen anything like this. Allowed herself a grim smile. Tell them to hold on, we are coming. Below the orbital battle on the surface of the colony world, survivors huddled in underground shelters and watched the sky. They saw flashes of light that marked explosions in space. They heard the distant thunder of ships dying. For months they had known only despair. Now, for the first time, they felt something else. Hope. An elder named Eth gathered the children of his shelter around him. They were terrified, trembling, waiting for death. He pointed upward, toward the invisible war raging above their heads. Do you see those lights? He asked. They came across the stars to save us. They are fighting and dying for people they have never met. Remember this, little ones. Remember that when the galaxy abandoned us, strangers answered our cry. In orbit, the battle raged on. Human ships fell, but the impossible was happening. The 12 human vessels were holding their own against 47 enemies. They were buying time. They were proving that the monsters could bleed. And somewhere in the chaos, troop carriers began their descent toward the planet. The ground war was about to begin. The drop pods fell through the atmosphere like burning meteors. Inside each one, human marines gripped their harnesses and prayed. The heat was tremendous. The shaking was violent enough to blur vision and rattle teeth. Warning lights flashed red as enemy anti-aircraft fire streaked past. Sergeant Cole watched the altitude counter spin downward. 10,000 meters, 5,000, 2,000. The retro rockets fired with a bone-crushing jolt, and the pod slammed into the ground. The hatch blew off and was out before the dust had settled. He found himself in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city. Tall spires of crystal lay shattered across the streets. Buildings designed like giant flowers were now blackened shells. Bodies of civilians littered the ground, their forms twisted in death. "Marines, form up on me," commanded through his helmet radio. "We have hostiles in the city center. Move fast, stay together." His platoon assembled around him. 40 soldiers in powered armor, each one carrying enough firepower to level a building. They had trained for this. They had been born for this. Earth had spent 200,000 years teaching humans how to survive in hell. Now they would bring that lesson to the enemy. They moved through the streets in tactical formation. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning flesh. Somewhere ahead, they could hear screaming. Soldiers were executing prisoners. Private First-Class Tours was the first to see the enemy. She came around a corner and nearly collided with a warrior. The creature was enormous, 8 feet of muscle and scales and claws. Its armor was sleek and dark. Its eyes were the yellow of infection. It lunged at her with a speed that should have been impossible for something so large. Its claws raked across her chest plate, leaving deep gouges in the metal. Stumbled backward, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "Remember your training," she told herself. "Remember why you are here." She raised her rifle and fired. 3 rounds punched through the creature's skull. It fell at her feet, still twitching. "Contact," she reported, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "1 hostile down." "Good work," Tors replied. "Keep moving." They pushed deeper into the city. Every block brought new horrors. Children hanging from makeshift gallows, elders piled in mass graves, survivors being herded toward execution pits. They were not just conquering, they were erasing. Lieutenant led a squad toward a large structure that had once been a gathering hall. Soldiers had turned it into a command post. Intelligence suggested it controlled enemy operations across the entire sector. "We take this building, we blind them in half the city," told her squad. "Stack up on the entrance. We go in hard and fast." They breached the doors with explosive charges. The interior was chaos. Officers scrambled for weapons. Human Marines poured in, firing with deadly precision. Killed 3 enemies before they could reach cover. Her soldiers moved through the building like a storm, clearing each room, each corridor, each floor. They fought back with savage desperation, but they had never faced anything like this. One of her Marines took a plasma bolt to the shoulder. The armor held, barely. Another was tackled by and nearly torn apart before his pulled the creature off and shot it to pieces. By the time they reached the top floor, had lost 4 soldiers, 4 friends. She felt their deaths like knives in her chest, but she did not slow down. She could not slow down. The command center fell in 11 minutes. Human Marines raised their flag over the ruins and broadcast their position to the rest of the strike force. 1 sector down, 100 more to go. Across the city, Sergeant Cole led his platoon toward an internment camp. Thousands of prisoners were being held there, awaiting execution. The guards had received orders to accelerate the killing before the humans could arrive. Saw the gates ahead and felt rage burn through his veins. Guards were dragging prisoners toward execution pits. Children screamed for their parents. Parents screamed for their children. "No prisoners," ordered, "kill them all." His Marines opened fire with everything they had. Soldiers fell by the dozens. Some tried to surrender, did not care. These were not soldiers, these were butchers. The camp was liberated in 20 minutes. Stood in the center of it, surrounded by weeping survivors and the bodies of their tormentors. An elderly approached him, trembling on frail legs. "Why?" the old one asked through a translator. "Why did you come? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you." Removed his helmet. His face was covered in sweat and blood. His eyes were tired but gentle. "Because you asked for help," he said simply. "That was enough." The ground war continued for days. Human Marines fought through cities and forests and underground bunkers. They rescued survivors from death camps. They destroyed enemy strongholds. They died by the hundreds and they killed by the thousands. Medic Tyler Brooks worked without sleep for 72 hours straight. He treated wounded Marines and wounded with equal dedication. The refugees were fragile, their bodies not designed for the violence that surrounded them. Tyler handled them with infinite care. A girl watched him work. She had lost her entire family to the. She had no one left. But she watched this strange creature from the Death Planet, this being who had crossed the stars to save strangers, and she felt something break inside her. "Will you stay?" she asked through her translator. "When the fighting is over, will you stay with us?" Tyler looked at her and saw all the children he could not save, all the families he could not protect. He knelt down to her level and spoke softly. "I cannot stay, but I promise you this. You are not alone anymore. Earth will remember your people, and if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, we will come back." The girl nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, but she believed. By the fifth day, human forces had liberated 3 major population centers. Over 2 million had been saved from extermination. The ground forces were in full retreat, their confidence shattered by enemies who fought without fear. But the war was not over. In orbit, the battle still raged, and the final confrontation was yet to come. The battle for the had raged for 7 days. The human fleet was bleeding. 4 ships had been destroyed. 3 more were so badly damaged they could barely maneuver. Over 800 sailors and Marines had died in the void between stars. But they were bleeding too. 23 of their 47 warships had been reduced to wreckage. Their ground forces had been pushed back across 3 continents. For the first time in their history of conquest, they were losing. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Defiance and studied the tactical display. Her ship was wounded. Her crew was exhausted. But she saw something in the enemy formation that gave her hope. They were clustering around their flagship, protecting their overlord instead of pressing the attack. They were scared. "Captain Santos, do you read me?" she said into her communicator. Captain Greg Santos commanded the UES Horizon, a destroyer that had taken heavy damage in the early fighting. He was a quiet man, a former engineer who had risen through the ranks on merit alone. His ship was held together with emergency patches and the prayers of his crew. "I read you, Admiral. The enemy flagship is exposed on its port side. If we can draw their escorts away, you could have a clean shot." There was a long silence. Both of them knew what she was asking. The Horizon could not survive a direct assault. This would be a one-way mission. "Understood, Admiral," Santos finally said. "It has been an honor." Closed her eyes for a moment. "The honor was mine, Captain. Godspeed." The trap was set with terrible precision. The Defiance and 3 other vessels made a feinting attack on the right flank. Enemy escorts moved to intercept, leaving a gap in their formation. The Horizon accelerated through that gap at maximum power, heading straight for the enemy flagship. Overlord saw the human destroyer coming and felt true fear for the first time in his life. This was not a tactical maneuver. This was not a calculated attack. This was a creature throwing itself at him with no regard for its own survival. "Stop that ship," he roared. "All weapons fire." Beams of killing light struck the Horizon again and again. Her shields failed. Her hull buckled. Fires erupted across every deck, but she kept coming. Her engines pushed her forward even as she died around her crew. Captain Santos stood on his crumbling bridge and watched the enemy flagship grow larger in his. Most of his crew was dead. His ship was a coffin, but he was still moving. "For the he whispered. The Horizon struck the flagship at full speed. The collision was cataclysmic. Both ships tore each other apart in a bloom of fire and metal. Overlord died screaming as the vacuum claimed him. His command structure was annihilated in an instant. The fleet, leaderless and terrified, began to withdraw. For 1,000 years they had brought death to the galaxy. Now death had found them. On the ground, Sergeant Cole heard the news of victory through his helmet radio. He was standing in a refugee camp. surrounded by survivors. 11 wounds marked his body. He had refused medical treatment until every civilian had been tended to first. "We did it," Tor said beside him, her voice cracked with exhaustion and relief. "We actually did it." Looked at the faces around him. Children who would grow to adulthood. Elders who would tell stories of this day for generations. Families that had been torn apart but not destroyed. "No," he said, "they did it, we just helped." The aftermath of the battle was long and painful. Human ships limped home carrying their dead. Medals were awarded. Speeches were made. But for the survivors, the memories were too fresh for celebration. Admiral attended every funeral. She spoke the name of every sailor and marine who had fallen. She remembered their faces, their voices, their dreams. They had died so that strangers could live. She would not let them be forgotten. The Galactic Council demanded an explanation. Why had humanity intervened without authorization? Why had they started a war that could destabilize the entire region? Commander Daniel Grant stood before the assembled species and answered without hesitation. Though I had asked for help, every civilized world had refused. Only Earth had answered. "We do not apologize for saving lives," he said. "We do not regret fighting monsters, and we serve notice to every species in this galaxy. If you come for the innocent, if you bring genocide to the helpless, we will be there. We protect our own, and from this day forward, they are our own." The Council had no response. The Dominion, humiliated and weakened from a space they would never return. On the survivors began to rebuild. They erected monuments in every city. The names of every human who had fallen were carved in crystal that would endure for 1,000 generations. Songs were composed in languages humans could not speak, telling the story of the who came from the void. Ambassador Eth visited Earth 1 year after the battle. He found Commander Daniel Grant in the Memorial Garden outside the Defense Council building. Small trees grew there, one for each soldier who had not returned. "My people wish to offer you a gift," Eth said. "We have nothing of material value. We are still poor and broken, but we have this." He held out a small crystal orb. Inside, light swirled in patterns of breathtaking beauty. "It is called a memory stone. We have placed inside it the gratitude of every who survived. When you hold it, you will feel what we feel. You will know that you mattered." Daniel took the stone and felt warmth spread through his body. For a moment, he sensed 40 million hearts beating in unison, 40 million voices whispering thank you. "This is too much," he said quietly. "It is not enough," Eth replied. "It can never be enough, but it is all we have." Across the galaxy, the story spread. The of Saul had done the impossible. They had faced extinction and won. They had answered a cry for help that everyone else ignored. They had proven that humanity was more than savages from a death planet. Years later, when other species faced annihilation, when other peoples cried out for salvation, the message traveled through desperate channels. Plead for aid, and the will answer with valor. And Earth always did. The veterans returned to their lives. Tors finished her education and became a teacher, telling her students about distant stars and the importance of courage. Cole taught at the Marine Academy, training the next generation opened a small restaurant in Montana where she served coffee and never spoke of the war. They never considered themselves heroes. They had simply done what needed to be done. But in the hearts of in the songs they sang and the stories they told, these humans from the Death Planet were immortal. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. When innocents cry out, when hope seems lost, when darkness threatens to consume everything, there are beings who will stand against it. Not for glory, not for power, but because it is right. Plead for aid and answer with valor. Always.